literature. My name is Ryan Hilbert.
And my name is Savannah Berry. Today we are looking at Edgar Allan Poe's poem, The City in the Sea, published in 1845. Poe lived from 1809 to 1849, so this poem is one of his later ones.
Yes, and although it is widely accepted that the poem is titled The City in the Sea, this is only the finalized version of the poem. It was actually published twice prior to this title, the first being in 1831 under the title The Doomed City, and the second time being in 1836, 5 years later, under the title City of Sin.
Yes, and stylistically, this poem is quite interesting because it consists of 5 stanzas, the first containing 11 lines, and the second containing 12 lines, the third with 6 lines, and the fourth with 12, and the final one just being a one-liner. So this poem is packed full of plenty of romantic and Gothic language that you would expect from Poe. Words such as eternal rest, melancholy, stone flowers, gaily jeweled, hideously serene, things like that particularly stood out to us as being romantic and Gothic. There's also a deliberate use of alliteration, rhyming, and assonance throughout his poem. And then you can listen to Ryan and I give a reading of the poem. Lo, death has reared himself a throne in a strange city lying alone, far down within the dim west, where the good, the bad, and the worst, and the best have gone to their eternal rest. There shrines and palaces and towers, time-eaten towers that tremble not, resemble nothing that is ours. Around, by lifting winds forgot, residingly beneath the sky, the melancholy waters lie.
No rays from holy heaven come down on the long night time of that town, but light from out the lurid sea streams up the turrets silently, gleams up the pinnacles far and free, up domes, up spires, up kingly halls, up fanes, up Babylon-like walls, up shadowy long-forgotten bowers of sculptured ivy and stone flowers, up many and many a marvelous shrine, whose wreathed friezes intertwine the vial, the violet, and the vine.
Residingly beneath the sky, the melancholy waters lie. So blend the turrets and the shadows there, that all seem pendulous in air, while from a proud tower in the town, death looks gigantically down.
There open fanes and gaping graves yawn level with the luminous waves, but not the riches there that lie in each idol's diamond eye. Not the gaily jeweled dead tempt the waters from their bed, for no ripples curl, alas, along that wilderness of glass. No swellings tell that winds may be upon some far-off happier sea. No heavings hint that winds have been on seas less hideously serene.
But lo, a stir is in the air. In getting into the analysis of the poem, many interpretations of the poem and ours in the beginning was that the city may be underwater or sunken, like Atlantis maybe. But this is mentioned in Dwayne Thorpe's research in the Duke University Press. And Thorpe mentions that there were 2 articles by a T.O. Malbutt, who is a professor and scholar of literature, and spent the majority of his time writing and researching Edgar Allan Poe. So if you're coming across anything Poe-related, you will come across this man's work. But his interpretations were challenged. He fully believed that the city was sunken, but a Roy P. Blasser, who's another historian, offered different interpretations and critical approaches to studying the poem. He believed that the city in the poem was indeed level with the water, and he proved it by the line that states, "Their open fanes and gaping graves yawn level with the luminous waves." So whether the city is underwater or not, it is barren. There's no people around except for the dead. Some suggested themes that Thorpe's article discusses is Gomorrah and Babylon. These are 2 biblical cities. Gomorrah is a place that is, quote, notorious for vice and corruption, end quote. It is found in the Old Testament of the Bible and is near the Dead Sea. And Babylon is another area that could be connected to the city, but it is not near any sea. This suggests, as the article states, that the idea may be more symbolic rather than a literal Babylon. Babylon is defined from the Oxford Dictionary as a contemptuous or dismissive term for aspects of society seen as degenerate or oppressive, especially considering the police, and was a famous city from ancient Mesopotamia. And in those ancient times, the city meant gate of God. Both of these ideas of comparing Poe's city to Gomorrah or Babylon seem to have biblical influence. Thorpe discusses this biblical influence in his article, stating that he thinks Poe's source was biblical, and identification of it casts some infernal illumination on his use of a Christian work to create a nihilistic vision. This is very interesting because it seems to fit perfectly into the Gothic and Romantic style of Poe, juxtaposing beauty with death as he does, and Christianity with nihilism. An example of his use of joining two seemingly unfitting things is the line that he uses, stone flowers. This places something very heavy and ugly up against something beautiful and fragile. And of course, he also brings two contrasting things together in the eternal resting place, where the good and the bad and the worst and the best have gone together to rest.
Yes, and while the biblical angle is certainly compelling, it's one of many. There are many different ways to view this poem. A popular interpretation is that Poe is actually symbolically describing his experience living in America. In the poem, he does create a juxtaposition between the opulence and the darkness. He describes towers and kingly halls, but nobody inhabits these halls. The only inhabitant that does not reside in one of the gaping graves is Death himself. So Professor Robert Oscar Lopez offers a similar take on this interpretation, and he actually suggests that Poe is creating a distorted version of America through his eyes, as he would see it, despite his saying that the place resembles nothing that is ours. Poe notoriously struggled financially, which leads me to theorize that in some fashion this poem is an attack on materialism as a whole. We're shown the gaily jeweled dead are inhabitants of the city, and Poe says that these jewels are futile in tempting the waters from their bed. Essentially, it's about their material possessions not being able to control the landscape that they're in, and they're actually of little use aside from their beauty.
I agree, and I also think that the poem could be rejecting materialism. There's no people to enjoy the city. There's no one to enjoy the shrines or the architecture or even mourn the dead. It's a barren city in the sea. And even the dead don't seem to be there. As Thorpe stated, and even as you kind of hinted at in your research, the world that Poe creates is a city populated only by the gaily jeweled dead. And those ignominious gems are powerless to tempt the waters from their bed. And that mocks their inert owners and, in a way, rejects materialism.
Yes, and that's actually where most of the fun in analyzing this poem comes from, is that there's a wide array of angles and perspectives you can take on, truly. And when you place it in the context of Edgar Allan Poe's life itself, the poem becomes sort of a reflection of him. It's very interesting. It's a way to take a dive sort of into his psyche and the way he processes things like that.
Yeah, like with what I was researching, Poe is obviously very, very intelligent in the Bible and biblical things, but he's obviously does not practice any of that. And so I think he does take his work as a kind of a criticism to that. And I think that this poem is definitely could be interpreted as part of that criticism that he likes to do.
Absolutely, and that criticism could also probably be interpreted as antinomian in its nature.
Yeah, definitely. I think this is a hard poem to analyze and give an analysis to.
Yeah.
But it's definitely like once you get into the nitty gritty of it, you can find antinomian aspects throughout it, like with what you were saying with the anti-America kind of idea.
Absolutely.
That seems very antinomian, and because we're very patriotic. Absolutely. Americans are. So, and if that is, what you were researching is a valid way to go down, then that's definitely antinomian.